you been avoiding conflict lately? Are you afraid that if you speak your truth to someone, you might damage the relationship permanently? Is inner conflict eating you up inside? Maybe you're thinking one thing, but doing another, and you just can't seem to get your head and heart to line up. As humans, we all deal with conflict. Join Jennifer McKenna now as she talks to business leaders about the importance of conflict and how we can all move through it with greater grace and ease, ultimately taking our relationships and our lives to the next level by facing conflict courageously.
Welcome to Conflict Rising, everyone. I have a great guest today, Jerry Gonzalez, who's the Executive Director of the Georgia Association of Latino Elected Officials. And I asked Jerry, before I introduce him officially, I asked him to come onto the show because I have been personally challenged by the frustrations of what is happening to our Hispanic communities right now. Within the last week, I feel like I am inundated with news that is specifically targeting these communities between what we are seeing as border cages, where they're housing people at the border, the ICE raids that have been going on recently, and then the mass shooting, where the shooter has acknowledged that he was specifically targeting this market, so to speak. And so when I hear the intro to the show and it talks about inner conflict, I think I'm riddled with it right now, but it's really not inner conflict as in I'm confused as to how I feel. I'm actually enraged, so I'm going to go ahead and put that out there. So anyone who doesn't agree with my position on this, you're welcome to your opinion, just as I'm welcome to mine. But this is how I'm going to channel my anger, by asking Jerry to come on and give us a perspective on behalf of the Hispanic community here in Atlanta. So Jerry, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jennifer, for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you.
Yes. So before we jump into this very heated topic, can you give us a little bit about your background? What do you do? I think I read somewhere where you're not just the executive director, you're actually the founder of this. Is that true?
That's correct. I'm founder and executive director of the Georgia Association of Latino Elected Officials, also known as GALEO. And we promote civic engagement and leadership development of the Latino community all across the great state of Georgia. So we've been doing this for over 15 years now, and we have a great big footprint all around the state of Georgia. So one of the things that we do focus on with regards to policy has been the issue of immigrant rights and immigration reform. So we've spent a lot of time and expertise on that subject matter. So I bring that years of experience to the subject matter as well.
Fantastic. And we're going to tap into that well of knowledge as we go in this conversation. So thank you for being here. Can I ask one more thing about your organization before we do a deep dive into the subject matter today? That is, what made you start this organization?
Well, we started this nonpartisan organization to ensure that we were going to be a catalyst for engagement of the Latino community. We knew that the Latino community was growing in Georgia. We knew that it was going to grow fast, given the demands of our economic reality in the state. Latinos were filling a lot of those jobs and needs that our state was having. So we knew that the community was going to grow, and we wanted to be a catalyst for that engagement to happen sooner rather than later, because we sort of foresaw some of the challenges that we're having today continuing to grow. And we wanted to make sure that we were ready as a community to be able to face those and push back on some of those challenges that we're seeing.
Okay, perfect. This is perfect for our discussion today. So I want to start with the title of the show, because I think there is a whole faction of people that would think that I'm being inflammatory, right, by using the term cages, border cages, ICE raids, and mass shootings. That seems pretty inflammatory. Some may think that I'm sensationalizing what's happening. What is your perspective on how I've positioned this and what's happening?
Well, I think you've positioned it exactly as how it is. I would go a step further. The attack that happened in El Paso was not just a regular mass shooting. It was the largest domestic terrorism attack from a white nationalist that was inspired and used the same words that our president is using with regards to how he refers to particularly immigrants of Latin descent, in particular Mexicans. And in fact, the police have verified that he told them that he was specifically targeting Mexicans. So when the danger of someone in the Oval Office using the type of racist, white nationalist rhetoric that the president is using associated when he talks about immigrants and people of color is inflammatory and does have the potential to incite violence. And I think that we saw that reaction manifest into what happened in El Paso, where this person went there, drove 10 hours specifically because he wanted to kill Mexicans. So it is a white nationalist, domestic terrorist attack that happened in our nation, and we should call it for what it is. And the president has some responsibility associated with his racist and white nationalist rhetoric that he continues to use.
Yeah, and so why would someone deny the fact that he's used this language or that it's even racist? Where do you think that comes from, the denial of it?
Again, I've lived in the South a long time, and it's impolite to talk about racism. It's impolite to talk about race. It's impolite to call people on their racism too. But quite honestly, unfortunately, we're living at a time where those of us that don't think in those ways about other races, about other nationalities, about other people, it's silence is complicity. And it's up to us, people of good moral background that don't have those racist and white nationalist views, for us to speak up and push back on some of that rhetoric, because it is dangerous and it is poisoning the political environment that we're in.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I was fortunate enough that when I was in college, and for those that don't know, I grew up in a small town in southern Indiana, completely white. Our minority population was very small. Growing up, I probably could have counted on my right hand how many friends or associates or acquaintances I had of color. And so when I went to college in northern Indiana, which was near Chicago, it was somewhat the same way. And what I found for myself was it wasn't that I had a racist bone in my body. It was that I was completely ignorant. I was completely and 100% ignorant to what it was like to be a person of color in this country. And I had a professor, a very progressive professor, who told our class if we went to a certain event that evening, we would get extra credit. He didn't tell us much about the event. He just said you had to stay till the end. And he gave some kind of a caveat that we had to have some proof that we stayed till the end. I can't remember what it was now. But and so we all said, yeah, fine, sign us up. Went to the event. I go to the event. And it was an event, I can't even remember what the name of the conference was, but it was from one of our minority associations. So it was for one of our fellow population that was for black professionals. And I can't remember if it was black engineers, but the actual organization was something of that name. And so I go in there and I sit and I see my classmates, my fellow white classmates walk in, and I see their physical discomfort. And so I'm making mental notes as a 20-year-old sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, everyone's uncomfortable simply because we are now a minority in this room. It was such an enlightening moment to actually have that epiphany. This is what this feels like. And I watched the discomfort among my peers become so great. They couldn't stay till the end. Now, this was in the early 90s. and so granted, I'm dating myself quite a bit, but it generated an epiphany inside of me that then led to a tremendous desire to understand something I didn't understand a little bit more. So when I fast forward all these years and I feel like I'm constantly looking around at the threat to minority populations, we went from targeting Muslims to the Black Lives Matters movement and now this Hispanic issue. I, as a white woman in America who has lived a life of being part of the majority population, I am outraged that this has been going on and I have been naive to it for the better part of my life. And I am no longer willing to sit back and stay naive or put my blinders back on. So that's just a little personal history, but I view some of these denials differently because of the way I was raised. And I think there's a whole faction of people who are literally naive and in denial simply because they don't have people of color in their communities. And so when the president makes statements like this, they don't see it as racist. They see people like us who are empathetic. They see people like us as raising an issue that isn't there. But his rhetoric is what stirs fear inside the minds of people who don't know. That's the problem I have with it. Now, yes, there are actual people who are overtly nationalist and racist, and we should absolutely call them out. And they certainly shouldn't be running any governments. So I'm off my soapbox. I always get on a soapbox, Jerry. This is the first time you've been my guest, but I have to warn you. I choose these topics because I get very fired up about them. But I'm not here to spout my opinion. I want your more objective, professional, and personal experiences because I'm seriously just an observer in this. My opinion doesn't count nearly as much.
I don't know if I can be objective in the sense that I'm affected. I've been told to go back where I came from, even though I was born in Texas, grew up along the U.S.-Mexico border in Laredo, Texas. So immigration is not a foreign concept to me. It's something that is near and dear. In fact, I had the exact opposite experience that you had in college, where I grew up in a town where it was 95% Mexican-American. Diversity wasn't like you. Diversity wasn't necessarily. I could count on my hands a few white people that I knew growing up, and then I went to college, and that's when I experienced greater diversity as well. And I never felt like a minority until I went to college because of my experience in growing up in Laredo, Texas. But I think, I can speak for myself, and I can speak from my personal experiences that border town that was selected, El Paso, could have very easily been my hometown, Laredo, Texas, because there's a lot of Mexicans that come across the border there, go shopping at the Walmarts there. My family is still living there, so that hit very close to home. So, and there was many Latinos in this country, many national Latino leaders signed this op-ed that was in the Washington Post recently about how we feel like we are under attack. And we do need to call this for what it is, because when we call it what it is, we are better able to deal with the reality of the situation and be able to prepare as a nation to deal with these types of things. So it is white nationalism, it is racism, and it makes people uncomfortable because we've not had a really good tenure for dealing with race in this country for quite some time. And unfortunately, our president is using sort of that discomfort that people have to sort of exploit some of the fears and uncertainties that people have about the world that's changing before our very eyes. America is becoming much more diverse. It's going to be 1 out of 3 Americans is going to be of Latino descent in the year 2050 is estimated. So certainly I think there's some uncertainty and anxiety about that. But the fact of the matter is that we share more in common than we have in differences. The fact of the matter is that as we embrace our diversity, we become stronger as a nation, as we always have had. So I think that we have to call things by their name to be able to get to a place where we can work through the issue and come out on the other side in a better shape.
I wholeheartedly agree, because fundamentally, in order to make proactive and positive change, the first step is acknowledging that there's a problem. If you can't acknowledge that this is a problem and you can't name it, then we can't solve it. And if you are looking around and denying that this is a problem, I just have to wonder, I always laugh that I'm living under a rock, but wow, your rock must be bigger. I mean, it's everywhere. The conflicts that this kind of rhetoric is causing is everywhere. And it's not just superficial conflict. These are life-threatening, dangerous, very deeply physically and emotionally destructive consequences that we are dealing with. And we're seeing it every single day in multiple ways. And I, for one, have had it.
It's not just rhetoric; it's policies also that the administration is employing. Let's be clear about that. The rhetoric is one thing, and one thing that certainly he can do better on. But it's the policies too. I mean, it was the same day that the president was visiting both cities that were impacted, both in Ohio and in Texas, and the same day that he was visiting families to console those victims that were affected by the shootings and by the killings in both of those cities, he also had a massive immigration raid targeting Hispanic workers in the poultry plants in Mississippi. So from one moment of shock, a few days later, there's a greater moment of shock in the Latino community about literally children being left alone on their first day of school, not knowing where their parents were or if their parents were going to come home at all. So this past week has been extremely traumatic for many within the Latino community, because and again, they weren't arresting criminals, they were arresting people that were working. They were arresting people that came to this country to better their lot in life and better able to provide for their families, and they were hardworking people at these poultry plants. It's hard back-breaking work that not many people in this country that are citizens want to do that work. Right. People will say, yeah, Americans can do that job, but not many are lining up to do that we've seen.
Right.
So it is not just the rhetoric, it's also policies that are pushing that division of making it more difficult for people to be a part of this country.
Well, and he just rolled out another one, didn't he, regarding the new rule for the green cards? We're about to take a commercial break, but let's pick this back up when we come back. We're with Jerry Gonzalez, and we're talking about the president's policies that are hurting Hispanics in our country. Stay tuned.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
I'm Kathy Williams, host of Sexy Mom Abundant Life radio show on Thursdays. at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. On the show, we explore living abundantly in every area of your life. Ways to let go of limiting patterns and beliefs and to step into the flow of creativity and possibility, knowing you are supported by the universe.
Opiates has taken everything and everyone I've ever loved away from me. Everything.
I blew my ankle out and I got prescribed pain pills by my doctor.
If making my detox public is going to help somebody, I'm all for it. So I just wish I would have had a warning.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth. A message from Truth, the Ad Council, and ONDCP.
Welcome back, everyone. We're with Jerry Gonzalez talking about the threat to the Hispanic community, especially with the recent occurrences. And we were talking about the policies that the president's been instituting that directly impact the Hispanic community in negative ways. And I want to apologize because when we were going to commercial break, I was rushing my words so fast. I said Hispanics instead of Hispanic families. And so I just want to apologize because that was quite rude. A lot of times my mouth starts working faster than my brain can keep up. So, but truly, it has been a tragic week. Jerry was just citing that before we went to a commercial break. And right as we were moving into the break, I mentioned that he's also rolled out a new rule for green cards. So can you pick that up and share more about that with us?
Certainly. I think, unfortunately, the president has rolled out another plan associated with targeting folks that become legal permanent residents as well as naturalized citizens that essentially would prohibit them from becoming legal permanent residents or naturalized citizens if they use any kind of public benefits. So the fact of the matter is that by federal law, legal permanent residents are allowed certain public benefits only after 5 years of them being a legal permanent resident. So they don't get public benefits immediately. And certainly some of these families have both different statuses among the family members, where some children may be U.S. citizens, some children may be immigrants, some children may be undocumented immigrants, and the parents may be undocumented, and sometimes citizens too. So I think that this next rollout is an effort to further curtail legal immigration, not just illegal immigration. And again, it's part of a whole parcel that this president continues to push is a white nationalist agenda to keep America white, is the way I would say it, in an effort to make it less brown. But in all reality, if we look at the K through 12 system all across this country, that train has left the station. This country is already extremely diverse and will continue to get extremely diverse. Stopping migration isn't going to stop what some call the browning of America, because there's more Hispanics being born here than actually are migrating. So it is unfortunate that the president is using this type of policy and rhetoric to inflame animus towards the Latino community. And quite honestly, I've had many conversations with some friends that they're having a difficult time talking to their children as they're heading back to school about what they should do with regards to the domestic terrorist white nationalist attack that just happened, and what they should do if they get picked on for speaking Spanish or speaking with an accent, for example. And that's been happening more often than not, and it's unfortunate the state of affairs that we're in. Again, because the president is pushing political division as his way to position himself for re-election.
Yeah, those are conversations that we as parents should not have to have with our children. It just That should not be a conversation that we should have to have. But I am glad that the parents are having them just responsibly, because children are entitled to feel psychologically safe when they go to school every day. Every child of every race, every color, every nationality, every religion, every single child on this planet should have that basic right. I just find all of this so deeply disturbing. And I'm going to ask a very deeply philosophical and psychological question that we probably won't be able to answer, but I'd love your thoughts on it. Why in the world do we continue to deal with a faction of society that cares about the color of someone's skin? This is where I get lost every single time.
Well,
I don't understand.
I think it is philosophical, and I think it has more to do. I mean, part of the many blessings in life that I am thankful to God every day is that I've been able to travel to other places, and traveling to other places truly humbles, I think, your perspective on life and your perspective as what it means to be a citizen of the United States, but also what it means to be a human being on this planet. And what I've learned in traveling has been that as human beings, we have more in common than we have in differences. Culture, race is a social construct. It is not something that genetically can be proven per se, and it's something that's been constructed to oppress and to divide us as a society. And I think that since that creation of race as a social construct started, we've been trying to work through that trauma for many years now, and unfortunately, as human beings, we've not. But part of it is that I think having fear of the unknown, and fear of differences, and focusing on differences rather than looking for the similarities that exist as well. Yes, there's differences that exist. I mean, human beings are beautiful like snowflakes. That not one is alike like to another. But by the same token, we have more similarities than we have in differences, and I think we get lost in that sometimes and let our fears. When our fears take over, we act irrationally. Mm-hmm. And when we act irrationally, then that's, I think, when we're not being our better selves in dealing with other people. So I think we can move beyond that process. I do think we can see people for who they are, human beings, and unfortunately we have to work through some of that baggage that we have associated with the social construct of race that we've created in our minds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I intentionally, after that experience in college, I intentionally moved out of Indiana. I realized I was starving for cultural experiences. I realized that I was surrounded by people who looked alike, sounded alike, thought the same. I was completely finished with that whole scene. And so I have lived the past 25 years in the heart of Atlanta, which is very diverse, very, very culturally diverse. And I love it. And my children, every time we visit grandparents in Indiana, they privately thank me. Thank you, Mother, for moving before we were born. No offense, Indiana. I love you all. But truly, stop voting for Trump. Okay, so how much of this do you think is economically driven?
So there is that too. I think the fact that when we look at the immigration raids and what happened there, I mean, if we just look at Georgia as an example, people always talk about the costs of undocumented immigrants to the state, but they don't look at the benefits. And the fact of the matter is that it's estimated that over 70% of the agricultural workforce are undocumented immigrants in this country. And if you look at the production of agriculture in Georgia, it's about $16 billion. And some rough estimates, some of the anti-immigrant groups put the estimates of the cost at maybe $250 million to Georgia taxpayers. Because of undocumented immigrants, Georgia agriculture is producing $16 billion. Yet the largest, most inflated accounting of what they consider cost to be at $250 million. So if we look at economics, if we care about having affordable chicken to be able to feed our families, if we want to make sure that our produce is grown in this country and not outsourced to other countries, we need to make sure that we have a viable agricultural workforce that is being able to provide us with the food that we need to nourish our bodies and nourish our families. So I think part of it is also economic in the sense that some of these employers do exploit the workers in order to reap greater profits, and continuously the workers show up because there's work for them. The workers are taking jobs because there's jobs there for them to take. And unfortunately, when these raids happen, many of the employers go home safe and sound to their families, while the workers are the ones that end up being hurt and devastated in this process. But yet in this administration, there's been not a single employer that's been held accountable for any type of illegal immigration hiring. They've only targeted workers. So I think it is economic in the sense that it can be exploitative towards the workers. And unfortunately, the workers end up suffering in these situations and get held accountable, but the employers walk off and continue to hire additional folks in that same process.
And so are they able to hire more of the immigrants and the ones that just weren't taken away? Or are they going to struggle to have to hire minimum wage workers? I mean, what's going to come of this ultimately over time if this continues to happen?
Well, I mean, for national security reasons, the United States of America needs to produce its own food. We cannot rely on other countries to provide us with the very thing that we need to survive as a country, which is our food. So that's first and foremost, it's a national security issue. We need to make sure that we have the ability to have a robust agricultural system, and with workers that are here to help us provide for ourselves as a country, but also we have to respect and honor the workers as well and provide them with safe conditions for them in which to work and safe conditions in which them to live. And to live not with continual fear of looking over their shoulders because of they've been forced to enter the country illegally because of our broken immigration system, and then we're not reconciling, I think, the reality that we have in this country. So in the peak of immigration, during the time of peak immigration in the 1990s, undocumented immigrants were coming to this country about 300,000 per year. The number of visas for low-skilled workers that were legally available to folks to be able to utilize was maybe about 10 to 20,000 visas that were available. So you have this huge gap of the economy was growing, low-skilled workers were needed to keep the economy running back in the 90s, yet we only had 10,000 visas available for them to enter legally. So we created, because of our policies, we've created the problem that we're in with we've pushed people to the underground workforce economy of coming into the country legally because they couldn't get a visa. So that's part of the problem I think that we have is we need to make sure that we can do right by those that are already here. provide earned legalization to immigrants that are already here, have established themselves in workplace, have families that are here, and a path to citizenship for them, and then look at our immigration system in a way that reflects our economic and national security needs as well. And that's really, I think, what Congress has continued to drop the ball on year after year, ever since the Reagan amnesty in 1984, 1986, that happened. But we've been needing to reform our immigration system since that time, and unfortunately, Congress has failed to act. And that's why we have the situation that happens today, and workers can get exploited. Unscrupulous employers have an unfair competitive advantage because they're exploiting their workers. So it's a no-win situation for us as a nation. And that's why I think immigration reform is so vital for us to move forward with this.
Yeah, and so why do you believe they have dropped the ball on this? Do you think it's such a big issue, it's too overwhelming, they don't know what to do, so they keep diverting our attention with fear-based tactics? Or do you think it's political inclination? What's causing them not to adequately address the issue?
Well, under President Bush did push for immigration reform, and the Senate did pass immigration reform. Unfortunately, under Speaker Boehner, he didn't take up the issue that would have passed the House of Representatives. There's enough bipartisan support to get immigration reform done. There's enough public support. Over 70% of the public supports comprehensive immigration reform as we're talking about it. So the willingness, I think, is I think on the fault of both parties. Number one, the Democrats love to keep this issue alive because they can hit Republicans on the head with it and really use this as a wedge issue when it comes to them. And then Republicans are afraid that some within their ranks really want nothing to do with more immigration, but that's not a reality of this country. If we want to have a successful country, we need to continue to have immigration to keep this country thriving. So, I mean, we can look at Japan and the issues that Japan is having with the lack of migration into Japan, and the population is only getting older. They're having serious economic repercussions associated with that. We can't be in a position where we're going to shortchange our future because of this nativist reaction of keeping other people out. So I think that both parties have done a disservice to demonize this issue. But I think that there is broad bipartisan support for moving the needle on this, and I think that's what we need to keep working towards.
Yeah, and so as a result, we are all suffering, but the Hispanic community certainly has now suffered gravely. I have lots more questions for you, Jerry, when we return. Stay tuned.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on?
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing our conversation with Jerry Gonzalez about the threat to the Hispanic community with all the recent occurrences in our country lately. And so I have so many questions for you, but we're closing in on the hour, and so I won't be able to ask you everything. But I think about the holistic view, right? So we look at a president who is creating policies to directly and negatively impact the Hispanic community. I'm looking at Congress that cannot adequately address the immigration issue and develop and then execute a true immigration reform plan. I'm looking at total overt abuses at the border through the media images that I see. I'm reading about ICE raids, and then we just had a mass shooting from a shooter who acknowledged he was specifically targeting Mexicans. Okay, we've got a really ugly big picture here. And I wonder, what there is still a faction of this country, of this country's population, that is turning a blind eye to this, justifying it, or even defending it. There's a part of their minds, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that believes the notion that these people are a threat to our safety, right? The whole idea of the drug lord and the drug smuggling, and I don't know, I really honestly don't know what it is, but there seems to be a pervasive and poisonous thought that is in the minds of these folks. Do you think that's true, first? And second, what would you say to them?
The statistics and the academic studies that have been conducted associated with immigrant populations say quite the opposite. In fact, these mass shootings have been white men, not immigrants. But we're not doing anything about monitoring or tracking or asking white men to register in these situations. And clearly we have a huge access to guns in this country, which is part of the problem. That may be a topic for another show, but it's the fact of the matter is immigrants are not creating crime. Immigrants aren't doing crimes to the extent that the rhetoric sounds, and the data bears that out. When you look at academic studies that have studied this issue, El Paso it was one of the safest communities in the entire nation. They reached a death rate in one day that normally is a murder rate that would happen in a year. And it all happened not because other immigrants were committing the crime, but it was a white man that came into the community to create that terrorist attack against the Mexican and Hispanic community in El Paso. So again, the notion of safety is, I think, a false notion. It gets attention to people to think about that scary unknown and plays on people's unfounded irrational fears of the other, but it really doesn't bear itself out in reality. The study after study shows that the places where there's a higher concentration of immigrants are safer than places that have a lower concentration of immigrants.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was pleased to read that Gallup just issued a statement today that there is an increased support for allowing Central American refugees in. And that support's gone up this year. It was the largest increase actually came from Republicans. 14% of Republicans were not in favor of it, and it's now at 24%. Independents went from 52% to 58%. So I think the truth of the ugliness, the real ugliness, right? Instead, it's instead of the myth. To your point, the myth is that the immigrants are bringing a threat. The truth is we are overtly threatening these families and communities because of those fears, because of what that has perpetuated. And so thankfully, some of the data is starting to show the shift in that perspective among the population. Thankfully, I want to see the needle move on that more significantly. And it's not even about just letting people across the border, right? I mean, true immigration reform would do that very responsibly. But to your point, because we haven't had adequate reform, because that ball keeps getting dropped, we're swinging the pendulum from one extreme to the other. Let everybody in or abuse them at the border. I mean, there's got to be some semblance of true leadership at some point. So I think, for me, my real challenge is as a U.S. citizen sitting here thinking, this is not my country. I was raised by a wonderful father who was a very proud Marine. We were a very patriotic family. On the 4th of July, I aired a show with a retired commander from the Navy, and it was about patriotism because I wanted him to clarify what is true patriotism. And he made the statement, patriotism is not nationalism. And I think about being raised to be so proud of the American flag. And just yesterday, and I'm sorry my voice is cracking because I have a chest cold, my apologies. But just yesterday, I'm driving through an affluent neighborhood to pick up my kids from school, and someone has taken their huge lawn and they've raised an enormous American flag. I mean, enormous. I am not exaggerating if I tell you it's like 20 feet wide. And for the first time in my life, I had a very negative, visceral reaction to seeing it. And that saddened me deeply. So tell us, Jerry, what can we, those of us who are just sitting here feeling helpless, watching these atrocities happen, what can we do? What would you tell us?
Well, I mean, we're in the greatest democracy in the world. I still believe that this nation's better days are ahead of us rather than behind us. And I do believe that this nation's diversity is one of its greatest strengths and assets. And part of that is democracy is not just a one-time sport that happens every 4 years when we go vote for president. A democracy is a daily thing that we need to exercise as citizens to get the democracy that we deserve. Part of it is not holding our elected officials accountable on a daily basis, and making sure that our nation is moving in a direction that reflects our values. Our values of who we are as a nation is not putting babies in cages, not separating families as we've done with asylum seekers, not separating families as we do in a destructive, dehumanizing way with the immigration raids that are taking place, not banning someone because of their religion as we've done with the Muslim ban. So what actions are we taking on a daily basis to speak up for our values and in our democracy? And who are we holding accountable to that? So I think it's up to all of us to really be involved and roll up our sleeves. Now more than ever, many people have thought that democracy takes care of itself whether I vote or not. whether I participate or not. Now more than ever, your country needs you more than ever. And
Yes.
the fact of the matter is that more people in this country didn't vote in the last election than those that actually voted. So if we do have more people actually participating in the process, the outcomes that we will see, I think, will be a lot different. The kind of people running for office will be a lot different. But it's up to us to be engaged in that process, and we can't leave it to the talking heads on TV to tell us what we think needs to happen. We need to be involved in that process and making it happen.
Yes, absolutely. And some of us are getting fatigued by it. I mean, I get tired of calling my congressman because there's so many issues right now that fundamentally go against everything I believe in, against every value I believe this country stands for. It gets exhausting. So I concur, Jerry. I practically beg everyone listening to please get more active and please exercise your right to vote. Please engage in the conversation. Please keep up with what is going on and take a stand, because I think there's still too much apathy. I think there are a lot of us that in our fatigue, we decide we can't hear anymore, we can't see anymore, and so we hunker down and we go into the denial mode, which becomes complacency, and that is incredibly dangerous. Two of the most dangerous things that we can possess as human beings are naivety and complacency, and we absolutely have to wake up and recognize who is running the country, how they are representing us, and how they are morally acting disgracefully. We are abusing whole populations. We are inciting fear and hatred that is life-threatening. That is not right. So I made it clear at the beginning of the hour that I use this platform to learn, to teach, and to air my opinion. Okay, so it is just my opinion. But I do hope that people listening listen to my guest. Jerry, you've been a phenomenal guest today. Thank you for all of the information you've brought to the table. It helps for those of us that only see the emotionally charged side of this to really understand it better. There's a whole lot more involved, and we need really strong, good elected officials to clean up this mess and actually lead us in the right direction with a moral compass. So we're closing up the hour. We've got just a minute before we do close out. What are your parting words for listeners who've tuned into this today?
To continue to stay informed and educated about this issue. It's not a simple issue that you can put on a bumper sticker. It's a highly nuanced issue. Anybody who tells you different is lying. But it is important for us to be engaged and educated on this, and to continue to speak our minds about this and speak up against white nationalism and racism, because we can't be complicit in that type of ideology.
We absolutely cannot. Thank you again. Before we go, can you let listeners, anyone who wants to support your organization or get involved, where would you like to tell them to go?
Yeah, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/galeo.org. We post articles regularly there that people can stay informed on the issues that are important, and certainly they can join us in other activities that we do as well there.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's been a rough week just watching this play out. I want to send my thoughts and prayers to every single family out there affected by these tragedies. Every day my heart breaks for those families at the border, and it's been a really tough week to be an American citizen watching this. So, Jerry, thank you for taking my call. I wanted to do this topic this week. It's been very heavy on my heart. thank you for making a last-minute decision to come on and move your calendar to make this possible. I am so very grateful.
Thank
to
you
everyone
for having
else, yes, thank you. To everyone else, stay true to yourself. Don't go into denial. Work through your conflicts, and most importantly, go vote. Stand up for American values. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next week.